Duncan personally sent me to prison. My world collapsed in an instant. For the sake of his first love, he pushed me into the abyss. The ridiculous part is, he comes to visit me every single month. He sits on the other side of the visiting room, staring at me in silence. Each time, the guard repeats my words. The inmate refuses to meet. It's been 2 years. I have never seen him once. I refuse to see him. I refuse to forgive. I don't know why he keeps coming. All I know is that my hatred has never faded. When I get out, everything will be reversed. Chapter 01. 2 years in prison, hatred growing in silence. Prisoner 9527. You have a visitor. The cold, mechanical voice echoed down the corridor, hammering into everyone's eardrums. I paused the part one was polishing, set it neatly on the assembly line without a hitch. Around me, inmates cast glances, some pitying, some gloating. Their whispers crawled through the damp corners like insects. Must be that president's son again. Huh? Man's persistent, rain or shine. TSK. Sends his fiancé to jail with his own hands, and then visits every month to act all sentimental. Who's he performing for? 9527's a tough one. 2 years now, and she hasn't seen him even once. I ignored them, stripping off my grimy gloves. I followed the guard toward that all too familiar visiting room. Each step felt like treading on a blade dipped in poison. The iron door slammed shut behind me with a metallic clang, cutting off all sound. I sat on the cold steel chair and picked up the disinfectant-scented phone. On the other side of the glass sat a blurry figure. I didn't need to look closely. I already knew who it was. Duncan. That name had once been my faith throughout youth. Now, it was the curse gnawing my bones in every midnight dream. I didn't even have to see him to imagine his look, an expensive tailored suit, hair perfectly slicked back. That handsome face I once adored. Was it guilt on his expression now, or just the indifference of routine? Without hesitation, I lifted the receiver and spoke calmly to the monitoring guard beside me, my tone flat as still water. Tell him, I'm not seeing him. Then I hung up, the receiver hitting the cradle with a crisp click. The guard, clearly used to this monthly routine, sighed and repeated into his phone. Mr. Sun, the inmate Selena, refuses to meet. I didn't linger another second. Rising to my feet, I turned toward the door that separated me from freedom. As it opened, I caught, in the reflection of the polished handle, a glimpse of the man behind the glass, still frozen in place. Unmoving. 2 years, 730 days. He came 24 times. I refused him 24 times. And with each refusal, my hatred was sharpened until it could cut flesh. Back in the cell, I lay on the hard wooden bed and closed my eyes. But memory had its own wool. It dragged me back to that hellish afternoon 2 years ago. The president's office of Sun Group's top floor was bathed in sunlight, the city skyline glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. On my fingers still gleamed the diamond engagement ring he had given me. I was joyfully discussing the details of our wedding next month, but he slid a document across the desk toward me, his voice colder than I had ever heard. Selena, this is the evidence that you embezzled $20 million from the company using your position. I froze, my mind went blank. Duncan, what are you talking about? I picked up the file, my hands trembling. Every transaction listed pointed directly to me, and the signatures, every one of them, were in my handwriting. No, that's impossible. I didn't do this. I stood up abruptly, my voice breaking into a near scream. He merely looked at me, calm and expressionless. The face I had loved for 8 long years showed not a flicker of emotion. The evidence is conclusive. Each word he uttered was a hammer blow, shattering my world to pieces. The office door swung open, and several uniformed police officers entered. I stared at Duncan in despair, searching his face for any sign of hesitation, any hint that this was a cruel joke. There was nothing, only the cold, lifeless stillness of a stranger, and as the handcuffs clicked shut around my wrists, I saw her standing behind him, Teresa, his first love, the woman who always wore that fragile, innocent smile. The corners of her lips curved ever so slightly, an almost invisible trace of triumph. In that instant, I understood everything. At the beginning of my imprisonment, I was like a trapped beast, slamming against the cage, screaming my innocence. All it earned me was brutal suppression and deeper despair. The old inmates in my cell saw me as the pampered socialite I once was. and they delighted in tormenting me, stealing my food, tearing up my books, splashing cold water on my blanket at midnight. I never cried. I never begged. Tears are the most useless thing in the world. One time, the most arrogant of them, the so-called queen of the cell, snatched the steamed bun I had just received. I didn't fight back. I let her take it. The next day, she broke out in an angry red rash all over her body, writhing on the ground in agony before being rushed to the infirmary. No one knew that I had remembered her allergy to that cheap snow cream she used every day. The night before, while everyone was asleep, I had sprinkled the allergenic powder into it, quietly, carefully. After that, no one dared to touch me again. They began to fear me, because I was ruthless and I was quiet. A silent enemy is far more terrifying than one who screams. I began to use every resource at my disposal. With the meager wages from prison labor, I bribed the guard who ran the library and traded for book after book on law and business strategy. By day I was inmate No. 9527, numb and trudging through the work. By night, when everyone else slept, I hungrily devoured those books by the faint light seeping into the corridor. Every statute, every business case became a cornerstone of my revenge plan. I pricked up my ears for whatever scraps of outside news the guards casually mentioned, and I listened to newly arrived cellmates describe the world beyond the bars. Did you hear Sun Group just secured that plot in the south of town? President's son's really ambitious. Yeah, and his girlfriend Teresa is always in the news, charity events, galas, living the high life. Those words stabbed my heart like needles. Over and over, the more it hurt, the clearer my mind became. I spent my 28th birthday in prison. No cake, no well wishes. My parents cut me off after I was jailed. They were ashamed of me. Old friends had long since scattered. The only constant that day was the familiar name on the visitor list. Duncan. He used that monthly visit like a reminder that everything I had become was his doing. On the back of my diary I carved a few words with my nail. Duncan. Teresa. Blood for blood. That afternoon the prison psychologist came to see me for the first time. Dr. Liam. A middle-aged man who looked gentle and harmless. He sat across from me and, unlike others, didn't ask if I was adjusting or needed help. He just watched me quietly for a moment, pushed up his glasses, and said something abrupt and out of nowhere. Sometimes, lying low is for a more powerful strike later. My heart jumped, but my face showed nothing. I looked at him as if he were crazy. He smiled, said nothing more, and ended the session. I knew then that he was not an ordinary man. Prison life taught me one deep truth. Trust is a luxury. Leverage is the real currency. Chapter 02. Countdown, Plans Before Release. 3 months left until my release from prison. The days carved into the wall were already densely packed, every stroke soaked with 2 years of my blood and hatred. Dr. Liam's visits became more frequent. He would casually let slip bits of outside information. Lately, the stock market's been volatile. Sun Group's an important overseas acquisition seems to be hitting some resistance, he said one day as he sorted through his files. Speaking as if by accident, I was bent over sanding a wooden craft, my hands never pausing. Dr. Liam seems rather interested in business news, I said flatly. He looked up through his lenses, a curious half-smile at the corner of his mouth. At my age, you've got to find something to occupy your time. Not like you young ones, your futures are still long. He added, I've heard Sun Group isn't as unified as people think. A few of the elders have complained about Duncan's son's methods. And Miss Teresa, she's been too high profile lately. She's attracted a lot of controversy. I remained silent, pressing harder with the sandpaper. His information matched the scraps I'd been piecing together from other channels. Duncan's empire was not unassailable. And Teresa, the woman who'd stepped over me to get where she was, surely had countless vulnerabilities behind her glamour. I sneered inside. The higher you climb, the harder the fall. Teresa, your good days are nearly over. I was probing Dr. Liam. He was probing me. We were like two chess players across a board, each move cautious and deliberate. I pretended indifference while I memorized every word he let slip, turning each one over again and again. Who did he really belong to? Friend or foe? Until the truth was clear, anyone could be my enemy. 1 month left on the countdown. Esther from the cell block was getting out early. She was a hard-luck girl, sentenced for causing injury through negligence, and had been bullied a lot since arriving. Once I gave her a hand, And from then on she stuck to me like glue, calling me Sister Lena. The night before her release, the two of us sat in a corner of the yard. I pulled a crumpled scrap of paper from my pocket with a string of random letters and numbers written on it. Don't go home when you get out. Go to this address and look for a net cafe owner named Tony. Give this to him and he'll tell you what to do next. Esther took the paper, nodded hard, her eyes wet. Sister Lena, don't worry, I'll make sure it gets done. I looked at her, this girl nearly 10 years younger than me, still with traces of childishness on her face but eyes hardened by life into something fierce. Esther, the outside world is more complicated than this place. Remember, don't trust anyone easily. Not even that Tony. You must learn to judge for yourself. She clutched the scrap of paper in her palm as if it were her only hope. I understand. Sister Lena, I'll wait for you to get out. One look was enough for her to understand. My first pawn was in place. 1 week before my release, I received the final visitor notice. The same name, Duncan. This time, for the first time, I lingered an extra minute in front of the visiting room glass. I didn't pick up the phone. I simply stood with my back to him. I could feel the gaze stuck to my back, more complex and heavier than ever before. It seemed to contain struggle, pain, 1,000 unspoken words. So what? Too late tenderness is cheaper than grass. I straightened my spine and left without looking back. All I left him was a cold, resolute back. The night before my release, everything was silent. I held up a small shard of mirror I had secretly smoothed the edges of, and stared at the face reflected in it. Pale, gaunt, but those eyes that had once been soft as water now held only a cold, pond-like stillness and a sharpened edge. The old Selena died the moment she was sentenced 2 years ago. What lives now is a darker version of Selena, a demon born only to revenge. I took out the diary filled with my plans for revenge and went through it page by page. Carefully, deliberately, every step, every detail, every possible variable and contingency plan, I had rehearsed them in my head 1,000 times. After reading the last page, I struck a match and set 2 years' worth of toil and grief alight. The flames danced and lit my expressionless face. The paper curled, blackened, turned to ash. I didn't need those papers anymore, because every plan had already been etched into my bones and fused into my blood. The next morning, a guard handed me a thin slip of paper. Selena, you are released. I took the release notice. The texture of the paper felt unreal in my hand. My heart, quiet for 2 years, thudded violently for the first time. Not because of freedom, because the prelude to my revenge was finally about to begin. I stepped out of the prison gates. The sunlight stabbed my eyes and I squinted. The world felt both strange and familiar. Skyscrapers, cars, pedestrians, the noise flooded my ears and made them ache. Freedom, it turned out, was a heavy thing. Chapter 03. The Price of Freedom, setting out on the road of revenge. The prison gate was empty. I had long expected that no one would come to pick me up. Fine, I didn't need anyone's welcome. I tugged at the ill-fitting cheap coat on my back, walked to the curb, and flagged down a taxi. Driver, take me to Wutongli in the South District. It was the place I'd had Esther rent in advance, a top-floor unit in an old compound. Cheap rent, a mixed crowd, perfect for hiding. The room was sparse, 1 bed, 1 table, 1 chair, that was all the furniture. But it was safe. This would be my new starting point. My headquarters for the war to come. I swapped in a newly purchased SIM card and powered on the phone. The screen lit up and an encrypted message popped up immediately. Sis, I'm in position. Claude has been contacted. He's excited. Said he's waited a long time for this day. It was Esther. At last a cold curve tugged at the corners of my mouth. The first pawn had fallen exactly where it needed to. Claude used to be the top project manager at a rival company to Duncan's. He was ruined in a bid when Duncan used dirty tactics to crush him, leaving Claude disgraced. Over the years he'd been scraping by at the bottom, his hatred runs deeper than mine. A capable man with a grudge and nothing left to lose is the best kind of blade to wield. Over the next few days I shut myself in the room and, on a second-hand laptop, began feverishly gathering everything I could on Sun Group. Sun's stock price, financial statements, internal personnel shifts, even gossip about Duncan and Teresa. 2 years on, Sun's commercial leviathan looked even bigger. But the hole's rust had multiplied. Several vice presidents were only superficially united. A few major investments were returning far below expectation, propped up only by Duncan's iron hand. And Teresa, the woman who stepped over me to get where she is, had essentially become the lady of Sun Group. Her Starlight Charity Foundation, polished by the media, had turned her into the brightest charity socialite in high society. I watched news footage of her arm in arm with Duncan, smiling that gentle, charming smile, and my stomach churned. You paved your brilliant future with my flesh and blood. Teresa, it's time to strip you of that gorgeous robe. I contacted Esther through encrypted software and sent the first order. Tell Claude to get ready. I want all the sales data this quarter for Sun Group's new trend line as detailed as possible. Also, find a few beauty influencers with big followings online. I'll have use for them. New Trend was Sun Group's fast-moving consumer brand aimed at the youth market, a project Teresa had heavily pushed and one of her proudest achievements. But the brand was all flash and no substance, over-marketed and poorly grounded. What I was going to hit was Teresa's proudest possession. A few days later, Claude, via Esther, sent over the internal sales data for New Trend. Along with the data came a detailed analysis report. This blade was indeed fast and sharp. The numbers were far uglier than the figures disclosed in the financial reports, return rates were abnormally high, and user complaints clustered around product quality issues. I compiled the data into a shocking dossier and then anonymously sent it to several beauty bloggers known for exposing fakes and being merciless critics. I said nothing else, only one line attached. Want to make big news? After that, I carried out my second probe. Using an anonymous account registered overseas and layered with multiple disguises, I moved a modest sum and executed a small, fast in-and-out strike against Sun Group stock. The amount was not huge. It wouldn't make tidal waves, but it was enough to let Duncan's sensitive hounds pick up an unusual scent. I wanted him to know someone in the dark was watching him. I wanted to make him nervous, paranoid, to shift his attention away from a nameless pawn he thought had died. Sure enough, the next day financial media ran the story. Sun Group shares experienced abnormal volatility yesterday. Suspected targeted shorting by undisclosed funds. Sun Group has formed a special investigation team. I sat in my shabby rental and watched Duncan's son's composed face on the press footage and let out a cold little laugh. Duncan, you're impressive, but you underestimated the resolve of a woman clawed out of hell. You thought your opponent would be the usual wolves and tigers of the business world? No, your opponent is me, a demon you made with your own hands, born only to enact revenge. That evening I changed into the plainest clothes I had, pulled on a hat and mask, and went to an open-air cafe opposite the Sun Group tower. I needed to feel my enemy's aura up close. On the giant LED screen, a Sun Group promo looped, Duncan's confident face filling the frame as he proclaimed the grandeur of his corporate empire to the world. He had no idea his nightmare had already begun. Just as I was about to leave, a flashy red Porsche pulled up at the curb. The door opened and a woman in a Chanel suit stepped out. It was Teresa. She was dressed immaculate, wearing the perfect smile, but she looked around warily after exiting the car. Then the man in the driver's seat leaned out and planted a quick kiss on her lips. It wasn't Duncan. Almost instinctively I raised my phone, zoomed in, and with a sharp click captured the scene clearly. Teresa, this gift you've handed me, I accept. Another sharp blade for my revenge arsenal. Chapter 04. First Clash, Duncan's Probe. Duncan's investigative capability was formidable, but my counter-surveillance skills had been honed, little by little. In the prison, an environment where information was strictly controlled, he mobilized Sun Group's top cybersecurity team and ultimately only traced the shorting funds to an overseas shell company. The layers of firewalls and obfuscation left them empty-handed. That only made him more anxious. A shadowy, skillful enemy with unclear motives left him sleepless and restless. What he could never have imagined was that the so-called mastermind in the dark was the woman he had personally sent to prison, the one who should hate him to the bone, yet had become so insignificant he'd almost forgotten. Selena. Revenge can't rely on brute force alone. What I wanted was to strike at his heart. I wanted him to watch, with his own eyes, as everything he took pride in crumbled piece by piece at my hands. I needed a brand new identity, one that would allow me to stand before him openly and without suspicion. A month later, the city hosted a lavish business cocktail. Entry was reserved for the rich and powerful. I went too, not as Selena, but as Annie, a representative of a mysterious overseas fund who had just returned to the country. This new identity was one I'd spent heavily to forge, through Esther, who used Claude's network to build me a spotless background. It was flawless. Every record, every credential, every connection, perfectly clean. That night I wore a sleek black evening gown, its lines sharp and understated. My makeup was refined yet distant. I was no longer the gentle, smiling Selena who once followed behind Duncan. I stood in the corner of the ballroom, a glass of champagne in hand, watching the glittering crowd like a predator studying her prey. Duncan and Teresa were the center of attention. He was still tall, handsome, magnetic. Every woman's gaze followed him. Teresa, dressed like a peacock in bloom, clung to his arm and basked in the admiration around her. A perfect match, beauty and power. I lowered my gaze, hiding the brief flicker of mockery in my eyes. The moment was right. I walked toward a bald, heavy-set man chatting nearby. "Mr. Ma, it's been a long time." I greeted him with a poised smile. Mr. Ma was one of Sun Group's major suppliers and a notorious lecher. Before prison, I had negotiated with him several times on Sun Group's behalf. I knew his weaknesses by heart. He blinked in confusion, clearly not recognizing me. "You are..." "My name's Annie. We met at an auction in Europe. Surely you haven't forgotten?" I said smoothly, my tone steady enough to make him doubt his own memory. Men like him rarely remember the faces of women they failed to seduce. Sure enough, he swallowed the bait, flashing an oily grin. "Oh, yes, yes. Of course. Annie, you've become even more stunning." I ignored the greed in his eyes, chatting lightly about recent business trends. Between casual remarks, I let slip hints about the immense resources behind my fund and my keen interest in domestic consumer brands, especially New Trend. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried just enough to reach Duncan across the room. As expected, he turned to look at me. His eyes lingered on my face for 3 long seconds. There was scrutiny in his gaze, a flicker of curiosity, maybe recognition. He probably thought I looked familiar, but the unfamiliar, cool aura of this Annie before him erased the doubt just as quickly. He dismissed me as another ambitious woman trying to cozy up to Sun Group. He didn't recognize me. Perfect. That was the first step. Halfway through the evening, I accidentally ran into Duncan. He was surrounded by several executives. Mid-conversation, when I passed by with my champagne, pretending distraction, I brushed against one of the men. "I'm so sorry," I murmured, soft, polite, yet clear enough for Duncan to hear. He froze for a split second. That voice. He snapped his head around, eyes razor sharp. I had already turned away, leaving him only a lean, resolute back. I could feel his gaze prick at my back like a needle. "Duncan, are you beginning to doubt? Good. I will plant a seed of doubt in your heart. Let it take root, sprout, and grow into a towering tree that keeps you awake at night." The next day I received a message from Esther. "Boss, Duncan has sent people to check on you." I looked at the computer screen showing the flawless dossier of Annie I'd made, and smiled. "Search away. The deeper you dig, the more stuck you'll become." At the same time, the dirt I'd fed to those beauty bloggers began to ferment. A vlogger with millions of followers posted a review video with a blunt, explosive title, "Huge money review of new trend across the line, result, this year's biggest flop. Hands down." In the video she tore into New Trend, from packaging to ingredients to actual performance, leaving nothing unscathed. Worse, she posted screenshots of the internal data I'd supplied showing high return rates and concentrated user complaints. A single stone sent 1,000 ripples. The video quickly trended. Hashtag New Trend false advertising hashtag. Hashtag New Trend trash products hashtag. Hashtag Teresa get out of business hashtag. Countless consumers who'd been burned flooded the comments, telling tearful, angry stories of their experiences. New Trend's reputation collapsed overnight. Teresa panicked. Her proud achievement instantly became the biggest stain on her career. She began furiously deleting posts, launching PR campaigns, even trying to buy off the vlogger. But she didn't know the vlogger and the copycat marketing accounts that followed had already been protected by Claude's side with higher payments. Teresa's PR moves backfired, only provoking greater backlash from netizens. The harder she struggled, the deeper she sank. Sun Group's stock fell in response. Duncan was in tatters, and I received a call, unexpected, yet not surprising. It was Teresa. Somehow she'd gotten the private number for my Annie persona. When I answered, She spoke in that trademark tone, fragile with a thread of haughty confidence. Is this Miss Annie? I'm Teresa. I think we should meet. I looked toward the Sun Group tower out the window and let a playful smile edge into my voice. All right. The show had only just begun. Chapter 05. Closing in, unmasking Teresa. We met in a private room at an upscale club. Teresa still wore that exquisitely poised elegance, but a persistent irritability in her brow had begun to crack the perfectly maintained facade. She got straight to the point and pushed a check across the table. Miss Annie, I know your fund is behind the new trend incident. Here, 10 million. If you stop now and issue a public clarification, this matter will end here. She was the same as ever, assuming money could fix everything. I looked at the check and smiled. 10 million? I toyed with the check between my fingers. Miss Teresa, are you paying a beggar off? Teresa's expression darkened instantly. Miss Annie, don't be greedy. Crossing Sun Group won't do you any favors. Is that so? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Funny, I heard new trend was pushed through precisely because you insisted on it. Now that it's blown up, hasn't President Sun been upset with you? Teresa's pupils constricted sharply. I continued deliberately, each word measured. I also hear the old board members at Sun Group have long disliked you. This fiasco gives them the perfect excuse to make a move. Imagine if President Sun, to calm the storm, pushes you out as the scapegoat. Now that would be entertaining. Every sentence landed exactly where it would hurt. What she prized most was Duncan's favor and trust. I intended to show her that such favor is worthless in the face of massive interests. Who are you? Teresa's voice rose, sharp and no longer able to hold that veneer of grace. My identity isn't important. I tore the check into pieces deliberately in front of her and tossed the scraps to the floor. What matters is this. Miss Teresa, your good days are over. I rose and looked down at her, her face contorted with rage like an angry lioness. Go back and tell Duncan I'm not interested in new trend as an investment, but I am very interested in seeing new trend destroyed. With that I turned and left, leaving her alone in the private room, furious and exposed. Teresa was furious. She launched a frantic counterattack against me. She used her connections to spread rumors through the upper circles, claiming I was a shady woman trying to extort Sun Group. She even hired a few street thugs to teach me a lesson. But she underestimated me. Her hired men didn't even get close before Esther's ex-military bodyguards had them on the ground, begging for mercy. As for the rumors she spread, they backfired spectacularly, turning my mysterious investor Annie persona into a whispered legend. Everyone in the circle now knew about the woman who dared to challenge Sun Group, who dared to stand against Duncan's woman. I took advantage of Teresa's stupidity and used it to forge alliances. Several business partners who'd long been suppressed by Sun Group began to reach out to me. We shared a common enemy, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Meanwhile, cracks between Duncan and Teresa widened. According to Claude's informant inside Sun Group, Duncan had a massive argument with Teresa over the new trend disaster. Duncan was a businessman. He could tolerate Teresa's vanity and temperament, but not her incompetence. He couldn't stand that her foolishness had caused such massive losses. His patience was wearing thin, but that wasn't enough. I needed to fan the flames higher. I instructed Esther to send the photos I'd taken of Teresa kissing that unknown man, along with a dossier I'd prepared, detailing Teresa's embezzlement and lavish spending through the Starlight Charity Foundation, to the CEO of Sun Group's biggest rival, Hong Yuan Corporation. Blackmail is a blade best wielded by someone else. Sure enough, within 3 days, Teresa's scandals exploded across the media. High society scandal, Sun Group's future Madam President caught cheating, late-night car kisses with mystery man. Inside the life of charity queen Teresa, where did the donation money really go? Photos, documents, everything solid. The internet went up in flames. Teresa's perfect goddess persona shattered into dust. She fell from a beloved charity icon to a despised, gold-digging hypocrite. Sun Group's stock plummeted once more, and this time, Duncan Sun's face must have been a masterpiece. The woman he'd loved most had betrayed him, publicly, humiliatingly, in front of the entire nation. He had become the biggest joke under heaven. I sat in my shabby apartment, eating instant noodles while watching the internet tear Teresa and Duncan apart. The comment sections were a battlefield of mockery and outrage, and I laughed so hard that tears streamed down my face. Duncan, you sent me to prison for her, and now, this woman you fought so hard to protect has slapped you harder than I ever could. How does it feel? Teresa was finished. The Sun Group board held an emergency meeting and stripped her of all her positions within the company. The Starlight Charity Foundation was placed under investigation. From the clouds, she crashed straight into the mud. She called me dozens of times. I didn't answer a single one. Then, like a lunatic, she came to the hotel where I was staying, screaming in the lobby after the security guards blocked her from coming up. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at her. I watched as she went from hysterical rage to sobbing collapse, finally crumbling to the ground like a stray dog abandoned by its master. Pathetic. And then my phone rang. A strange number. I answered. From the other end came a voice I knew to my bones, low, strained, simmering with anger. Miss Annie, we need to talk. Duncan. I smiled, a slow curve edged with ice and mockery. The show's only just begun. President's son. Why so impatient? Chapter 06. Duncan's predicament. Fragments of the truth. The Sun Group. Troubled both inside and out. The stock price kept falling, and several major projects under negotiation were frozen due to the scandal. The old members of the board of directors had also begun to stir uneasily. Duncan's recent days must have been tough. I saw his latest photo on the cover of a financial magazine. In just 15 days, he looked haggard. The clarity and determination he once had were replaced by exhaustion and pessimism. Inside me, there wasn't a trace of sympathy, only the satisfaction of revenge. That night, I received a call from Dr. Liam. It was the first time he had contacted me since I got out of prison. Could we meet? There's something I think will interest you. His voice was still gentle, but with a tone that left no room for refusal. We agreed to meet in a discreet tea house. He still carried himself with his usual courtesy, as if the role of prison psychologist had only been one of his many facades. Without much small talk, he placed a craft paper bag in front of me. Take a look. I opened the bag and took out a printed copy of a document. The title on the file made me momentarily lose my breath. Risk Assessment Report on the Secret Acquisition of the Pluto Technology Project by Sun Group. The date, 3 years ago. I remembered the name Pluto Technology. It was the last project I had been in charge of before going to prison. At that time, the Sun Group had planned to acquire that promising artificial intelligence company, and I was the primary person responsible for the project. Later, the accusations of embezzlement that were brought against me originated precisely from the accounts of that project. I turned page after page, and the more I read, the heavier my heart felt. The document analyzed in detail that if Sun Group tried to acquire Pluto through regular channels, it would face enormous legal and reputational risks because Pluto's core technology allegedly infringed an international patent. And on the last page of the report, the solution proposed was blunt. Fabricate a financial scandal against the project's responsible person, Selena, to have her imprisoned and thus interrupt the acquisition process. Later, through a third-party shell company, acquire the now chaotic Pluto technology, destabilized by the founder's arrest, at a very low price, and discreetly transfer its technologies and patents to Sun Group. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. So that was it. All along, I had been just a pawn that could be sacrificed at any time for the Sun family's interests. I had been framed and jailed not only because of Teresa's jealousy. It was also because the Sun family needed a scapegoat to pull off this dirty acquisition. I had always believed Duncan had cast me into the abyss for the sake of his goddess. Now it seemed I was wrong. Or perhaps Teresa was only a decoy, a conveniently placed excuse to hide the larger interests and plots behind it. My chest felt as if an invisible hand were squeezing it tight. The pain made it hard to breathe. Hatred. A tidal wave of hatred that threatened to consume me. But with it came an icy, absolute clarity. My target for revenge could not be limited to Duncan and Teresa. It had to be the entire Sun Group, that rotten commercial empire built on countless dirty deals and sacrificial pawns. Where did you get this document? I looked up and stared at Dr. Liam. He met my gaze calmly. My goal is the same as yours, to bring down the Sun family. He paused, then continued, although Duncan is the president of Sun Group, he cannot rule with impunity, especially not in front of his father. Samuel, Duncan's father, the founder of Sun Group, the man who had long since retired to the shadows yet still gripped the family's lifeline with an iron hand. The one who truly approved that acquisition plan back then was Samuel. Dr. Liam's words exploded in my mind like a thunderclap. I had always thought my enemy was Duncan. Now I realized Duncan might also be nothing more than a knife in his father's hand. My path of revenge suddenly became clearer and far more difficult. I was no longer preparing to fight a man blinded by love, but a calculating, ruthless business leviathan. Late that night I received a voice recording from Esther. It had been secretly recorded by the waiter she'd placed at the club Duncan frequented. The background was noisy, but Duncan's drunken, remorse-filled voice came through with surprising clarity. I had no choice. I had to protect her. Dad, he would do anything. I'm sorry to her. I'm sorry, Selena. The recording cut off there. I replayed those lines again and again, feeling a swirl of conflicting emotions. Protect me? He sent me to prison and destroyed everything I had, and he calls that protection? Duncan, what else are you hiding? I decided to temporarily slow my direct attacks on Duncan. I would aim my spear at the snake hidden deeper, the true poisonous head. Samuel. Chapter 07. Unveiling the Fog, Samuel's son's secret. I instructed Esther and Claude to use all available resources to dig into Samuel's son's past. That cunning old fox, who had dominated the business world for decades, surely had more than just the Pluto technology scandal on his hands. And sure enough, in less than half a month, a thick investigation report landed on my desk. Samuel's rise to power read like a dark criminal chronicle. Embezzlement of state assets, collusion between business and government, malicious suppression of competitors, and even connections to several unsolved criminal cases. As I read the shocking words on the pages, a chill shot up my spine. The Sun family was far filthier than I had ever imagined. Just as I was preparing to make my move, I sensed something was off. Strange faces began to appear near my apartment building, furtive, watching. My phone also started receiving silent harassment calls. Samuel, the old fox, had sensed danger. He was striking back. One night, when I returned to my apartment, I noticed clear signs that the door lock had been tampered with. I didn't go inside. Instead, I turned around immediately and went down to the street, using a public phone booth to call Esther. Advance the plan. Send what we have, bit by bit, to Samuel's old friends. Tell them it's time for revenge. Samuel had made countless enemies over the years. There were plenty of people whose families he had ruined. All they lacked was a chance, a leader. And now, I was giving them that chance. I would make Samuel taste what it felt like to be hunted by a pack of wolves. The next day, the Sun Group's stock price suddenly began to plummet wildly. Several major suppliers that had long partnered with the company abruptly announced contract terminations. The banks began demanding loan repayments. Overnight, Sun Group's cash flow stood on the brink of collapse. The intricate web Samuel had woven was torn open from within by my hands. He surely hadn't expected me to strike this way. That afternoon, a black Bentley stopped outside my apartment building. The door opened, and Duncan stepped out. He came straight upstairs, pounding furiously on my door. Annie, come out. I know it's you. I opened the door, meeting his bloodshot eyes with a cold gaze. His face was twisted with fury and pain. Why are you doing this? Why are you targeting my father? He stormed in, grabbing my shoulders and shaking me violently. This was, in the truest sense, our first face-to-face confrontation. I let him hold me, my voice flat and frigid. Duncan, you're only asking me why now. I met his eyes steadily. 2 years ago, when you sent me to prison, why didn't you ask yourself the same question then? He froze, his grip on my hands loosening unconsciously. You know everything? I know it all, what I should know, and what I shouldn't. I shook off his hands and took a step back, putting distance between us. Pluto technology, Samuel, and your ridiculous protection theory. Duncan, do you take me for a fool? I threw the acquisition report straight at his face. Look at your father's masterpiece. Look at how filthy your entire Sun family is. Duncan's son stared at the papers scattered across the floor, his face turning deathly pale. He knew then that I had uncovered every core secret. What do you want? He asked, his voice trembling with a trace of despair. What do I want? I let out a cold laugh. I want the Sun family to pay for everything they've done. I want Samuel to lose everything, his name, his empire, and rot in prison. You can't do that. Duncan's emotions flared. My father, he's old. Because he's old, he's allowed to trample lives? I cut him off sharply. During those 730 days and nights I spent rotting in prison, did anyone pity me? Our confrontation reached a deadlock. Meanwhile, outside, the Sun family's grand ship was visibly sinking, together with my allies in revenge. I exposed Samuel's early scandals one by one through every possible channel. The public went into an uproar. The man once hailed by the media as a business legend became overnight a despised criminal, scorned by all. In a desperate bid for survival, the Sun Group's board of directors stripped Samuel of all titles and publicly declared their severance from him. The very empire he had built with his own hands was the first to abandon him. Samuel had fallen, completely. Chapter 08. Duncan's Confession, The Final Struggle. The day Samuel was taken by the police for investigation, Duncan came to see me. He hadn't driven, nor brought bodyguards, just stood there alone, drenched and broken, beneath my apartment building. It was raining lightly. He was soaked to the bone, pitiful and defeated. I watched him from the window for a long time, my heart cold and still, and finally went downstairs. I didn't invite him in. I simply stood in front of him under an umbrella, enjoying my downfall. "Aren't you?" he asked, lifting his head. Rain ran down his gaunt face, mingling with tears, if they were tears. "Yes," I admitted calmly. "I've waited for this day for 2 years." He suddenly laughed, a hollow, desperate sound, filled with self-mockery. And then, as he laughed, this man who once stood so high above everyone else suddenly fell to his knees before me, with a dull thud against the wet pavement. "Selena, I'm sorry." He knelt in the cold rain, lifting his tear-streaked face toward me as the flood finally broke loose. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." I looked at him, feeling nothing. If apologies worked, why would prisons exist? "Duncan, stop with that pathetic act. I will not forgive you." "I know. I'm not asking for your forgiveness." He choked on his words. "I came today just to tell you the whole truth." Kneeling on the ground, he began, in fits and starts, to tell the so-called truth he had hidden for 2 years. Back then, when Samuel decided to use dirty methods to swallow Pluto technology and chose me as the sacrifice, Duncan had opposed it. He argued with my father, resisted, but to no avail. Samuel threatened his family if Duncan didn't comply. What awaited me would be worse than prison, disappearance, erased from the world. Samuel was ruthless. He would do anything. Duncan said he was left with no choice and could only select this method to protect me. He fabricated evidence and personally sent me to prison so I would vanish from Samuel's sight and be in a comparatively safer place. He believed that if I served 2 years and the storm passed, he could get me out and make amends. He visited me every month to let me know he hadn't abandoned me. Sitting behind that cold glass, watching my resolute back, his heart split. He wanted to tell me the truth, but he couldn't, because he knew that as long as Samuel lived, I would never be safe. I listened quietly to his confession, feeling only absurdity. So I spent 2 years in prison, my reputation ruined, my family destroyed, and I'm supposed to thank your protection? I asked coldly. No, he shook his head in pain. "I know there's nothing I can say to make up for it. I was wrong from the start. I shouldn't have been so cowardly. I shouldn't have yielded to him. What good is saying that now?" I watched him kneel in the muddy water, humiliated to the core, and for the first time the tidal wave of hatred in my heart loosened just a little. It turned out he wasn't wholly evil. He was simply a pathetic coward, bound by family ties and vested interests. But I would not forgive him. The harm had been done, it could never be erased. "Duncan, I will not forgive you." I spoke each word deliberately. "But I can give you a chance to atone." He snapped his head up, as if clutching at a last life-saving straw. "You say it, whatever I must do. I'll do it," he pleaded. "I want you to help me completely destroy the Sun Group." My voice was as cold as ice. "This is your only salvation." He went blank for a moment, then forced a bitter smile. "All right," he agreed. To atone, he chose to personally tear down his family's legacy, to stand with me and bury that rotten empire once and for all. He handed over every top-secret internal file of the Sun Group, every financial gap, and the entire web of Samuel's illicit deals from over the years. With those in hand, the Sun Group had no way to recover. Just as we were preparing to launch the final assault, Teresa, that woman I had nearly forgotten, leapt back onto the stage. Somehow she had learned that Duncan had betrayed his family and was working with me. Like a madwoman, she drove a car straight into my apartment building. Luckily Esther had caught wind of it in time and we evacuated. Standing there watching the Porsche crushed to pieces and Teresa being taken away by the police in a wild daze, I could only laugh. This woman, in the end, had been so foolish. She had run out of tricks. Chapter 09: The Final Counterstrike, The Collapse of the Sun Group. Duncan and I joined forces for the ultimate strike. The fatal evidence he had provided was released by me in waves, timed and deliberate, into the hands of the media and regulatory authorities. The entire business world trembled. The Sun Group's dark underbelly was peeled open, layer by layer, its bloody truth laid bare before the public. Tax evasion, falsified accounts, political collusion, and even criminal cover-ups. Each revelation was more shocking than the last. The media storm engulfed everything, pinning the Sun Group forever to the pillar of shame. The once mighty business empire was now a public disgrace. Massive fines and class action lawsuits followed one after another. The Sun Group's stock price plummeted day after day until it was nothing but worthless scraps of paper. That once glorious corporate empire, on its 30th anniversary, officially declared bankruptcy and liquidation. The Great Tower collapsed overnight. Samuel was sentenced to life imprisonment. Teresa, too, was convicted for her many crimes and imprisoned. They all paid the price for what they had done. When the dust finally settled, Duncan asked to meet me. We met at the cafe we once loved most. He slid a folder across the table toward me. These are all my assets, including the old Sun family estate. They're yours now. He chose to leave with nothing, to repay his debt to me in this way. I didn't accept it. I don't want your money. What I want, I'll earn myself. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. I'm leaving, he said. I'll go somewhere no one knows me. Start over. All right. He stood, bowed deeply. Take care, Selena. Then he turned and walked away, without looking back. I watched his figure disappear at the corner of the street, unsure what I felt. Revenge fulfilled. Yet there was no triumph, only an immense emptiness. A few days later, under the alias Annie, I purchased a portion of the Sun Group's best assets from its bankruptcy liquidation and used them to establish my own company, the Rebirth Group. At the founding press conference of Rebirth Group, for the first time, I stood under the glare of the media's lights as my true self, Selena. Calmly, I told my story, 2 years of injustice, and the truth behind it all. I cleared my name. I reclaimed my dignity. After the conference, Esther and Dr. Liam approached me. Esther had become my most trusted ally, the vice president of Rebirth Group, and Dr. Liam finally confessed to me his true identity. His father had once been Samuel's most trusted business partner until Samuel betrayed him, destroying his family and driving him to ruin. For years, Liam had been waiting in the shadows, biding his time for revenge, and when I appeared, he saw hope. We were natural allies. I stood in the top floor office of Rebirth Group, gazing down at the city that had once taken everything from me, now lying beneath my feet. I, Selena, had returned. As a queen. Chapter 10: Rebirth, Power and Solitude. I became a legend in the business world, a woman who had walked out of prison and single-handedly toppled an empire. My name, Selena, appeared again and again on the covers of major financial magazines. Those who once avoided me, even kicked me when I was down, now scrambled to flatter and court my favor. I stood at the peak of power, enjoying a glory I had never imagined. But in the stillness of night, an immense loneliness and emptiness would swallow me whole. Revenge had once been the only reason I kept living. Now that vengeance was complete, I felt like a sailor who had drifted too long at sea, suddenly ashore, yet directionless. Dr. Liam seemed to see through my confusion. He told me Duncan had settled in a remote town abroad. He had given up the business world entirely and now worked quietly as a librarian in a small community library, living a modest, peaceful life. He never remarried. He remained alone. One day, I received an anonymous international package. Inside, there was no letter, only a single photograph. It was of a vast field of sunflowers in full bloom. They had once been my favorite flower. I stared at the photo for a long time before tucking it away in the deepest corner of my drawer. Then I began to think, what should my life be after revenge? Should I continue playing the endless game of power, or search for something new? I handed most of the company's affairs to Esther and Dr. Liam. They were my most trusted partners. With part of my fortune, I founded a charity dedicated to helping women who, like me, had suffered injustice and had nowhere to turn. I wanted to use my strength to help them, to give them, too, a chance at rebirth. I began to re-examine my life. I no longer lived for hate. I would live for myself. I began learning new languages, traveling across the world, broadening my horizons. One sunny afternoon, I found myself sitting alone in the same cafe where Duncan and I used to meet. I ordered my favorite latte. As memories from the past quietly resurfaced, my heart remained calm. All that love and hatred had slowly faded away with time. Chapter 11. Reunion and Release, the Cycle of Fate. Years later, at an international business summit in Switzerland, I met Duncan again, completely by chance. He was there as a representative of his local community, participating in one of the summit's charity panels. He was thinner than before, and time had etched quiet lines across his face. But there was a calmness in him now, a steadiness I had never seen. When he spotted me in the crowd, he froze for a moment, then gave me a faint smile. That smile held no resentment, no regret, only the serene relief of two old souls meeting again. During a break in the summit, we walked along the shores of Lake Geneva and talked. It was a calm, unhurried conversation, like two old friends catching up after many years. "You're doing well," he said sincerely, looking at me. "I often see you in the news. I'm proud of you." "So are you," I replied, glancing at his simple cotton shirt. "It looks like you've found the life you wanted." He smiled softly and nodded. "Selena." He seemed to want to say more, but in the end only sighed. "I've already paid for what I did. Now, I just want to wish you happiness. I stopped hating you long ago," I said quietly, "but I'll never love you again, Duncan. Between us, only peace remains." His eyes reddened slightly, but he still smiled and nodded. "I understand." That meeting was our last conversation. We said a formal goodbye to the past. After that, we went our separate ways, distant mountains, endless rivers, never to meet again. And in that farewell, I found complete release. The shadows of the past no longer bound me. I lived as someone truly independent, truly strong. I turned my story into a memoir titled Rebirth. The Sun CEO sent me to prison, and I made him kneel before me after I got out. To my surprise, the book became a bestseller, inspiring countless women struggling through their own despair. At the end of the book, I wrote, "Hatred will fade with time, but only growth and inner strength are eternal." Chapter 12. The finale. The Queen's Path Never Ends. In the years that followed, my business empire continued to expand. Rebirth Group grew into a true global powerhouse, spanning industries, markets, and continents. And I, Selena, became its one and only queen. I no longer chased mere profit. Instead, I used my power to build a fairer, more transparent business world. The foundation I had created helped tens of thousands of women escape hardship and reclaim their lives. Esther and Dr. Liam each found their own paths, careers and happiness they truly deserved. We were more than partners. We were family. As for Teresa and Samuel, they would spend the rest of their lives behind cold iron bars. Their downfall stood as a warning to the world. No sin escapes its reckoning. My story was adapted into a film and television series that swept across the nation, becoming a cultural phenomenon. In interviews, people often asked me if I ever regretted anything. I only smiled, saying nothing. There are no second chances in life, every step counts. It was pain, betrayal, and struggle that shaped the woman I am today. Standing at the podium of the Global Women's Leadership Summit, I faced an audience of brilliant women from around the world, sharing my story and my beliefs in fluent English. I spoke of women's strength, of the necessity of financial and personal independence. When the speech ended, the hall erupted in thunderous applause. I was not a fairy tale princess who found her happy ending with a prince. I chose a far broader stage, life itself. My world shone because of me. My name, Selena, became a symbol of an era. It stood for resilience, wisdom, and unyielding strength. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my office, gazing down at the city glittering beneath me. A confident smile curved my lips. The queen's path never ends. My legend had only just begun. Story 2. When my son was 2, I had a huge argument with my in-laws. And since then, I haven't stepped foot in their home. For over 10 years, every time there was a visit to my in-laws, it was my husband who took our son. On my mother-in-law's 70th birthday, my husband and son insisted that I go with them. Unable to resist their repeated pleas, I finally agreed. Before dinner, my husband handed everyone an 8 yuan bottle of milk, but he handed me a 3 yuan one instead. There are no more 8 yuan ones. Just take the 3 yuan one. Anyway, you always drink the cheaper stuff at home, and you can't tell the difference. My son chimed in after hearing his father's words. Yeah, Mom, just take it. At your age, does it really make any difference if it's cheap or expensive? It's just a bottle of milk. You don't need to be so petty. I smiled wryly, speechless. Chapter 1. I looked at the simple, unadorned bottle of milk in my husband Leo's hand. Then I glanced at the empty carton on the floor that used to hold the 8 yuan bottles of milk. Leo would give everyone their 8 yuan milk, but never to me. Suddenly, I found this marriage utterly meaningless. I didn't reach out for the bottle of milk. Instead, I looked up calmly at Leo and said, I want a divorce. Leo stared at me, bewildered, as if he were looking at a madwoman. What did you say? It's just a bottle of milk. Don't lose your mind here. The whole family is watching. Give me some face. You're over 40 now, and still acting like a young girl, fussing over a bottle of milk. I think you're doing this on purpose. Tell me, in all these years, have you ever fulfilled your duties as a daughter-in-law? You haven't set foot in my family's home for over a decade. Today is my mother's birthday, and yet you still have the audacity to make a scene here. Wasn't it just that, when our son was 1 year old, my mom and sister offended you? Is this your way of getting revenge? Hearing the commotion, our son Lucas stood up, his face displeased, and said to me, Mom, can't you consider the bigger picture? It's Grandma's birthday today, and we're all happy. Can't you just not ruin the mood? It's just a bottle of milk. What's the difference between the 3 yuan and the 8 yuan one? Don't you usually drink the cheap stuff at home? There's no need to be so petty, is there? I've heard about those things from Grandma and Dad. They were all trivial matters. Yet you haven't visited Grandma all these years. She still talks about you often. And I think it's time you stopped. Don't push it just because the whole family has been indulging you. I looked at Leo coldly. What have you told Lucas? Was I really the one being unreasonable back then? Chapter 2. Leo blinked, his expression showing a hint of guilt. He awkwardly tried to change the subject. Let's not talk about this now. My mom and sister are busy in the kitchen, and all the relatives are here. You, as a daughter-in-law, should make an effort to go help them. But just then, my mother-in-law appeared, smiling broadly, saying, No need. Helen and I have prepared everything. You all come and eat now. My son signaled me with his eyes to go to the dining room. I didn't want to sit down for a meal with them and put up a pretense of harmony. Yet, my husband and son dragged me to the table. I have to admit, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had prepared quite a feast this time. There were steamed crabs that my husband loved, braised prawns that my son enjoyed, and even my favorite sweet and sour ribs. Seeing the plate of sweet and sour ribs, my husband winked at me and said, See, just now you were thinking of making trouble at my mom's birthday, but she didn't hold it against you. She even made your favorite sweet and sour ribs. Where could you find a better mother-in-law? My mother-in-law waved her hand, saying, As long as you're all happy, that's enough for me. I'm old and not of much use anymore, so I can't help with my children's affairs. Your sister needs 300,000 yuan more to buy a house, and she's been so worried she can't even sleep. Leo looked up, gave me a sly smile, and said, Mom, we're all family. I can't let you keep worrying like this. Even if I were okay with it, Zoe certainly wouldn't be able to bear it. Right, Zoe? All the relatives around the table turned to look at me. Only now did I understand why Leo insisted on me attending my mother-in-law's birthday celebration. He wanted to borrow money to help his sister buy a house. My sister-in-law Helen and mother-in-law exchanged a quick glance, their smiles barely concealed. The relatives also praised my husband, saying how loyal and loving he was, willing to give so much money to help his sister. They all seemed to completely ignore me, assuming I would agree. Yes. For all these years, Leo always seemed to consult me on everything, but my opinion never really mattered. He'd just ask, assuming I would say yes. But just as Leo was looking smug, I gave an answer he never expected. Sure, as long as you divorce me, we'll split the assets 50-50. And then, of course, you can do whatever you want with your share, including giving $300,000 to your sister for her house. The atmosphere instantly turned cold. Leo, feeling his pride was hurt, glared at me and said, "How much longer do you want to act crazy? Do you want all the relatives to laugh at our entire family?" My son, impatient, slammed his chopsticks down. "Mom, can't you think about the bigger picture? Acting like this, you're only hurting Grandma and Auntie's feelings. Every time our family gets together, it's always so harmonious. Grandma and Auntie have always been so good to me. Why is it that every time you come, there's all this drama?" Chapter 3. I looked at my son in front of me. He's 18 years old now. He is my only child. And from the beginning, I loved him like he was the apple of my eye. I always hoped to give him the best protection I could offer. I thought he would grow up to be an understanding and considerate young man. But after all these years of raising him, I realized that I mean less to him than his grandmother and aunt, whom he only sees a few times a year. If that's how it is, then maybe I don't want this child anymore either. Lucas saw me staring blankly and thought his words had convinced me. Smugly, he said, "Mom, now that you've realized you were wrong, why don't you apologize to Grandma and Auntie? Sit down and join us for dinner? We won't hold it against you." I let out a cold laugh and said to him, "Lucas, look closely. Do you see any place for me at this table? Your whole family is packed in tightly. Where do you want me to sit?" My son then looked around and realized that the entire table was indeed full. There was no place left for me, not even a pair of chopsticks. My mother-in-law quickly stood up, giving my sister-in-law a look that seemed scolding. "Helen, how could you forget to leave a place for Zoe?" Helen picked up some food and, chewing, said a bit irritably, "How would I know she'd come? She never shows up when there's anything going on at home. It's always just us." So naturally, I forgot about her. Since I got married, I've always felt that my mother-in-law's family has treated me as an outsider. Before, Helen's words would sting, but at this moment, all I felt was sheer annoyance. Leo grew more impatient, raising his voice to say, "Zoe, it's Mom's birthday today, and there are so many relatives here. Isn't it normal if there's not enough room at the table? Can't you just take some food to the kitchen and eat there?" My son chimed in, "Yeah, Mom, you often eat in the kitchen at home, so why make such a fuss?" I frowned, looking at my son, who was so indignant. "Do you really think anyone likes eating in the kitchen? Every morning, I wake up early to make you breakfast, prepare clean clothes for you, and pack your school bag. When would I have time to sit down at the table and enjoy a meal? Even those 5 minutes eating in the kitchen are moments I struggle to find. I thought that while you and your dad were sitting comfortably at the table eating the breakfast I made, you would understand that I was sacrificing myself for you both. I never imagined that one day it would become the very reason for you to attack me. I've wasted my efforts raising you, and I accept that. Let's just say all my work these past years was for nothing." My son was about to say something, but my mother-in-law stepped in to stop him. All right. Let's stop arguing. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have celebrated my 70th birthday. If I hadn't, none of this would have happened." She spoke while wiping her tears, her head of white hair making her seem pitiful. But I knew her tricks well. This was just her way of adding fuel to the fire. Chapter 4. Sure enough, as soon as my mother-in-law finished speaking, Leo slammed his hand on the table, shouting at me, "Zoe, what are you doing? My mom only has one 70th birthday, and you ruined it. What exactly do you want? Haven't I been good enough to you all these years? Don't I always ask for your opinion first about everything in the house? Even if you don't want to lend my sister money for her house, you don't have to go this far. Now, apologize to my mom." Leo tried to press me down to bow and apologize to my mother-in-law, but I shook him off forcefully. Leo, ask yourself honestly, every time you ask for my opinion, haven't you already made up your mind? You just pretend to ask me, and every time, I'm forced to give the answer you want. You've grown used to my compromises and sacrifices on everything. Otherwise, why did you give everyone here an 8 yuan bottle of milk? Except for me, the one with a 3 yuan bottle? Leo let out a cold laugh. It's all about that bottle of milk, isn't it? How greedy can you be? When we get home, I'll buy you a whole crate of 8 yuan milk. Would that make you happy? I shook my head. Leo, you still think this is about a bottle of milk? It's not. The reason you gave me the cheap milk is because, in your heart, I'm not worthy of anything better. You think I only deserve the cheapest option, because, to you, everyone else here is more important than I am. I'm the one you can ignore. Leo froze, seemingly caught off guard by my words, as if I'd hit the mark on his true feelings. I turned and went to the living room to grab my bag from the sofa. I said to Leo, you and Lucas stay here and celebrate your mom's birthday. After her birthday, let's get a divorce. As I walked to the door, Leo finally snapped out of his shock. He seemed to realize I was truly determined to divorce him. He spoke in a flustered voice. Zoe, you need to think this through. Don't act on impulse. What can you do as a housewife? Can you survive without me? My son, holding my mother-in-law's hand, frowned and said to me, Mom, you'd better think this through. If you divorce Dad, I won't acknowledge you as my mother. The threatening tone in my son's voice almost made me laugh. For all these years, I've put him first in everything. My son probably thinks I would definitely compromise and sacrifice myself for him. But this time, it's different. I turned back and calmly said to him, whether you acknowledge me or not is your choice. And I have mine. I don't need you as my son anymore. You can stay with your dad from now on. After saying this, I opened the door and walked out. As I left, I slammed the door heavily behind me. Chapter 5. The loud noise as the door slammed shut felt like a final punctuation mark on this part of my life, this marriage where I had lost myself. I thought that after walking out of my mother-in-law's house, I would feel sadness and regret for ending the marriage, but the reality was far from it. I exhaled deeply, as if a 1,000-pound weight had been lifted from my shoulders. My mother-in-law's apartment was on the second floor, and as I walked out the main entrance of the building, I could still clearly hear Leo's exasperated shouting from the window. Leave her be. I've got the car keys. Let's see how she leaves. She's always so stingy. She definitely wouldn't want to take a taxi. She'll come back to beg me in no time. Yes, in the past, I would indeed have hesitated to take a taxi. Leo's salary wasn't low, but our son Lucas was at the age where expenses were at their highest, limited edition sneakers, all kinds of extracurricular activities, plus our family expenses. If we only relied on Leo's income, it would never have been enough. Our comfortable lifestyle all these years was thanks to my financial management. Leo always boasted that he supported the entire family and gave all his money to me. But the truth was, without me, we would have run out of money long ago. Leo liked fishing, and each fishing rod cost thousands. He also insisted on wearing branded clothing. I could only save money on myself, wearing the same coat for 3 years, let alone indulging in the luxury of taking a taxi. But now I had nothing holding me back. I no longer needed to worry about the family expenses, no longer had to save up to buy a house for Lucas in the future, or save every penny for Leo and Lucas. I took out my phone and ordered a DD premium car. While waiting at the intersection, I noticed a man in his 50s or 60s wearing a floral shirt, riding an electric scooter and stopping at the entrance of my mother-in-law's apartment complex. He walked up to me with an extremely uncomfortable smile. Seeing his yellowed teeth, I couldn't help but suppress a wave of nausea. Oblivious, he asked me, "Hey there, beauty, does Lily live in this complex?" Wasn't Lily my mother-in-law's name? I nodded cautiously. The man said smugly, "Knew I had the right place. She's my girlfriend." With that, he clutched his flowers and headed into the complex. When did my mother-in-law start dating someone? And why did this man look so familiar? Suddenly, I remembered where I'd seen him before. I'd come across a video on my phone. It was of a young guy crying, saying that his mother's late-in-life romance ended with the other guy scamming her out of 500,000 yuan. And the photos in the video showed this very man. Chapter 6. If it were before, I definitely would have warned Leo and my mother-in-law to be cautious. But now I no longer have that obligation. I have nothing to do with their family anymore. Whatever happens in the future, they will have to face it. Just then, the car I had ordered pulled up in front of me. The driver politely opened the door for me. After getting in, I looked at the scenery outside the window, feeling that every breath carried the taste of freedom. The car stopped at the neighborhood where my parents lived. I knocked on the door, and my father opened it with a look of pleasant surprise. "Zoe, why are you back? You should have told us beforehand. Your mom was just about to make dumplings, saying she'd bring them to you later, and now here you are." Seeing the joy on my father's face made my nose sting with emotion. My parents and I live in the same city, but aside from holidays, I rarely visit them on regular days. I was simply too busy. Everything at home required my attention. Even if I did visit my parents, it was only for a short time, sometimes not even staying for a meal. My mother hurriedly filled a plate with dumplings for me to try. As I tasted the familiar flavor, I couldn't stop the tears from falling, one by one, onto the plate. My parents, worried, asked what had happened. I wiped my tears and said to them, "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. I may have disappointed you. I got divorced." Their reaction was different from what I imagined, though they were shocked. What I saw more in their eyes was a deep sympathy for me. My dad held my hand and said, "What are you saying? If you made this decision, it must have been because you suffered greatly. Why should you apologize to us?" My mom gently patted my back and said softly, "Zoe, I know you never got along well with your in-laws. Is this divorce related to them?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. All these years, I've only ever shared good news with my parents, never bad. It was only now that I finally opened up about why I had argued with Leo's family all those years ago. Chapter 7. When I had just given birth to my son, my body was already weak. When I was discharged, the doctor specifically told me to rest and eat nourishing foods. My mother-in-law agreed on the surface, but once we were home and Leo wasn't around, she looked at me with disdain and said, "Look at how fat you are now. I can hardly stand the sight of you. And you still want nourishing foods? You're lucky to even get millet porridge every day." I couldn't take the insult, so I told Leo about it when I got home. But my mother-in-law cried and yelled, "Leo, look at the wife you married. Here I am, at my age, cooking for her every day, whether it's stewed chicken or pork ribs, and she still talks about me like this. What's the point of me even living anymore?" And Leo didn't listen to my side of the story at all. He frowned, looking displeased, and said, "Zoe, I'm already busy enough with work. Can't you stop causing trouble for me? There's no way my mom is like what you say." At that time, my mom had just had surgery and was sick. I didn't dare tell her about all this, fearing it would affect her recovery, so I silently endured it. Despite being sick, my mom didn't forget to buy a few free-range chickens from the countryside for my mother-in-law to make soup for me. But my mother-in-law turned around and served the soup to my sister-in-law instead, until I fainted at home. When I was taken to the hospital, the doctor was shocked at how weak I was. He angrily told Leo that if he wanted me to survive, I needed to be properly nourished. Only then did Leo buy ginseng and chicken to make me a bowl of soup. But my body was already too weak to handle it, and I ended up with a nosebleed that wouldn't stop. Even now, I still have lingering health issues, often feeling dizzy and weak all over. The most unbearable part was when my mother-in-law and sister-in-law set their sights on my son. My sister-in-law had been married for 6 years but still hadn't had a child. My mother-in-law heard some nonsense somewhere, that if my sister-in-law adopted a child, she would be able to have her own. But my sister-in-law's family situation wasn't good enough to meet the requirements for adoption, so they set their sights on my son. One day, my mother-in-law, for once, kindly suggested that I go out for some fresh air, that I shouldn't stay at home taking care of the baby. But when I returned, my child was gone. I went mad, frantically searching for him. When Leo got home, I ran into his arms, sobbing, telling him our son was missing and he needed to call the police immediately. But my mother-in-law stopped Leo and said, No need to look for him. Your sister took him. We're all family. After all, you two can just have another child in the future. Let your sister have this one. Hearing my mother-in-law say that, I felt like tearing her heart out. I lunged at her, pushing her down, barefoot. I ran to my sister-in-law's house and took my child back. When I got home, he was burning with a high fever, and I, still in my pajamas, rushed him to the hospital. When his fever finally went down, I squatted in the hospital corridor and cried uncontrollably. From that day on, I completely cut ties with my in-laws and refused to ever set foot in their house again. At first, Leo tried to comfort me, saying he wouldn't force me to visit them. Chapter 8. I never expected that. After all these years, Leo would still hold a grudge, and even my son wouldn't understand me, siding with my in-laws to blame me. After I finished sharing everything, I also told my parents what had happened today. My parents looked at me, their eyes red with tears, full of sympathy and pain. My dad held my hand and said, "Zoe, you'll always be our daughter. No matter what, you don't need to stay with people like them anymore." I squeezed my dad's hand in return and said, "Dad, I even gave up my child. Aren't you disappointed in me? Didn't you and Mom love your grandson the most?" My dad touched my head and smiled, saying, "Silly girl, you are the most precious treasure to us. We love our grandson because of you, but you will always be our number one." I hugged my parents, crying my heart out. But it wasn't because of sadness over my own situation, it was because I realized that I am deeply loved too. I realized that I am not just someone's wife, or someone's mom, but also a daughter loved by her parents. I stayed at my parents' house for a few days, spending as much time with them as I could, until the third day, when Leo couldn't hold back anymore and called me. As soon as I picked up, his impatient voice came through the phone. "Zoe, have you had enough of this? When are you coming home?" These past 2 days, I've been planning to go fishing with friends, and there's no one to cook for our son at home. As his mother, shouldn't you hurry back? I responded coldly, "I'm not going back. Whenever you have time, we should go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. You and your son can deal with your own issues." He was taken aback. Maybe he thought that by giving me an out, I would obediently go back. He hadn't expected me to refuse him. He raised his voice. "Zoe, I'm the one calling you first. What more do you want? All this, just because of a bottle of milk? Is it really worth getting this angry? I'm telling you, this is the last chance. Don't regret it later." Listening to Leo's impatient tone, I couldn't help but think of when we had just started dating. Back then, he held my hand and kept complimenting how well I took care of my hands, saying he would never let me suffer, that he wanted my hands to stay beautiful forever. But now, my hands had long since grown rough and calloused, and Leo was no longer the man I remembered. Without saying anything more, I hung up the phone. Chapter 9. Regret? Absolutely not. A few days later, I saw a post from Leo on his social media. The caption read, "Money of your own should be spent on those closest to you." In the photo, my sister-in-law, mother-in-law, Leo, and Lucas were standing closely together, with 300,000 yuan in cash laid out in front of them. It looked like Leo still lent the money to his sister, but knowing her, she probably wouldn't pay it back, and Leo could forget about ever seeing that money again. In the following days, Leo and Lucas didn't call me. I didn't have time to deal with them anyway because I had found a new goal. Since I was young, I had always loved wearing all kinds of beautiful clothes, and my dream was to become a fashion designer. During this time, I wanted to take a step back and calm myself, so I picked up my old hobbies again. I often posted videos of myself designing and making clothes online. Unexpectedly, after just a few videos, they suddenly went viral. I gained quite a few followers. I was overjoyed because, initially, I had just wanted to do something for myself. But as my account gained more popularity, people started reaching out to discuss producing my designs in larger quantities. I was overwhelmed with work when I suddenly received a call from Lucas. His tone was still that of entitlement. "Mom, you haven't been home for a while. Dad and I haven't had time to clean, and the meat in the fridge has gone bad. Come back and take care of it. Dad's always out fishing, never taking care of things at home." and my grades have even gone down. Grandma's always running around outside, and sometimes she doesn't come home at night. I have no idea what she's up to. It seemed like my mother-in-law was doing quite well with her boyfriend, putting both her son and grandson out of her mind. Mom, why are you being so petty? It's been a while now. Shouldn't you be over it? I didn't reply. I hung up the phone and sent him one message. I already told you, I don't want you or your dad anymore. Stop calling me. After finishing my work, I made some time to visit what was once my home. As soon as I entered, a strong, pungent smell hit me. Garbage was scattered everywhere, and yellow liquid was oozing from the refrigerator. Leo and Lucas, lying amidst the mess, lit up when they saw me. Leo grabbed my hand and said, "Honey, you've finally come to your senses and come back home. Please clean up. We can't stay here anymore." Lucas hugged me excitedly, saying, "Mom, you're finally back. Please make me some food. I can't stand eating takeout every day." I shook them off and said with a blank expression, "I didn't come back to be your maid. Leo, I'm serious about the divorce. Let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau now." Leo looked me up and down. Chapter 10. Today, I wore my favorite design, my proudest creation. Even though I'm over 40, this dress made me look both beautiful and elegant. Leo squinted at me, and then, as if he discovered some big secret, his face flushed red with rage as he yelled, "I knew there had to be a reason you insisted on divorcing me. Just look at how you're dressed. Do you even know that you're already an old woman in her 40s? You're not suited to wearing this kind of clothing. Dressing up all flamboyantly like that. You must be trying to attract men." With that, he reached out to tear at the clothes I was wearing. At that moment, my hatred for Leo reached its peak, and I kicked him hard in the stomach. I was still wearing high heels, and that kick left Leo doubled over on the floor, groaning and unable to get up for quite a while. Lucas was stunned by what he saw, standing frozen, too afraid to say anything. I grabbed Leo, ready to take him to get the divorce certificate, but he clutched his stomach, still struggling. "Zoe, if you clean up the house today and behave, I won't hold it against you for hitting me. Think carefully, what will you do without me? I'm only staying with you for the sake of the kid. Otherwise, do you really think I'd care about someone like you? A woman over the hill?" Watching Leo's nagging, contemptible face, I clenched my fists and sneered. "Fine, you want me to clean up, right? I'll give you a proper cleanup." With that, I picked up the baseball bat leaning against the wall and swung it at the fridge in the corner. The refrigerator fell to the floor with a loud crash. It's rotten, spoiled contents spilling all over. I then swung at the living room table, cabinets, chairs, smashing everything until the house was a wreck. These pieces of furniture were things I once cared for meticulously, wiping them down every day. Back then, I was determined to keep this home intact. But what did I get in return? Now, with nothing holding me back, I smashed everything I had once carefully maintained, and the more I destroyed, the more liberated I felt, as if I were shattering the chains that had once bound me. Leo shouted in terror, "Zoe, you're insane. You're completely insane. A woman like you, I can't live with you anymore." I agreed to the divorce. Chapter 11. After getting the divorce certificate, I was finally free of Leo. We had 800,000 yuan in savings. Leo had lent 300,000 to his sister, and I took the remaining 500,000. The house went to Leo. Just as we finished with the divorce proceedings, Leo's phone rang. He answered it and exclaimed, "Mom, where am I supposed to get 500,000 yuan for you? I just divorced Zoe, and all the money went to her. Why do you need so much money anyway? Where have you been running off to all this time? Never coming home?" I smirked. It seemed things on Leo's side were far from peaceful. Someone was already getting ready to act. After the divorce, I was completely free. I had more and more creative ideas, and many people wanted to work with me long term. Most of my customers buying my designs were middle-aged women like me. One of my fans once commented that although my designs were suitable for women of this age group, they weren't stereotypical or something that screamed old lady clothes. Gradually, I achieved financial independence. My parents were still in good health and didn't need much care from me. So, I started traveling across the country. During my travels, I met many friends. Together, we visited places I had only ever seen on TV before. Once, after climbing a snowy mountain, I was preparing to go home and rest for a while. But at the supermarket, I happened to run into my old neighbor, Sandra. Sandra's parents lived in the same community as my former mother-in-law. We got along very well, and she knew exactly what my mother-in-law was like, so she disliked her just as much. Seeing me, she grabbed me with a gossip-loving look on her face and said, "Zoe, do you know? Ever since you divorced Leo, things have been awful for his family. His mom found herself some old man, spending money on him all the time. Not only did she spend all her pension, but she also kept asking Leo for money. She even cried every day, accusing Leo of being unfilial, forcing Leo to transfer the house to her name. Then, a few days later, she sold the house and gave all the money to that old man. Now that the old guy's taken the money and run, they're all crammed into a rental. I heard Leo's been so angry about it he's lost his mind, couldn't keep his job, and got fired. Leo wanted to get back the money he lent to his sister, but instead of buying a house, she invested it and ended up losing everything. Now, debt collectors are at her door every day. How could she possibly pay him back? When you were at home, your family was doing so well, we all envied you. But Leo didn't know how to cherish it. And look at him now. After hearing Sandra's words, I felt no waves of emotion. I had long known that this was the fate waiting for his family. And what did it have to do with me? Chapter 12. After saying goodbye to Sandra, I left the supermarket. But as soon as I walked out onto the street, I spotted 3 familiar figures. Leo was grabbing my mother-in-law's collar, frantically questioning her. "Where is that shameless old man you found? Where is he? Give me back my house, or I'll kill you." My mother-in-law was crying and holding onto Leo's hand, pleading, "I don't know either. He said he would stay with me forever. Who knew he'd run off with the money from the house? He must have had his reasons. Please, don't be mad, son. He might come back in a few days." Leo's eyes looked like they were about to burst. He was just a scammer. And now look, we're all going to be living on the streets. Lucas stood behind them, staring blankly at the scene, his 18-year-old face looking weary beyond his years. He used to refuse to wear anything but name brands. But now, the jacket he wore had multiple tears in it. Leo refused to let go of my mother-in-law, and the two of them ended up scuffling near the overpass. Leo shouted hysterically, "You're the reason I have no money, no house. Today, we're going down together." With that, he pulled my mother-in-law toward the edge. She screamed in terror, struggling desperately. In the chaos, she slipped, and both of them tumbled over the edge. The scene immediately descended into chaos. Someone shouted, "Call 120, quick, call for help. Someone's fallen off the bridge." Lucas's face twisted in terror as he watched it all unfold. That's when he spotted me in the crowd. Like seeing a savior, he rushed over, grabbed my hand, and shouted, "Mom, I know I was wrong. Please forgive me, won't you? I'll never say those things again. I know it was hard for you to raise me all these years. Mom, I promise I'll always be on your side from now on. Please, don't leave me. Take me home. I'll do whatever you ask. I promise. You can have all the expensive milk, and I'll drink the cheap kind." I shook him off and asked coldly, "Do you know why? Before your grandmother's 70th birthday, I always drank the cheap milk and left the good stuff for you all. And why that day I refused?" Lucas shook his head, whispering, "I don't know." I sneered at him and said, "Because before that, I loved you all. I was willing to do those things. But after that day, I no longer loved you. So no matter what you say or do, it doesn't matter to me anymore." Lucas stood frozen. I turned, got into my car, and rolled down the window. The cool autumn breeze rushed in. I put on one of my favorite songs and drove all the way home. When I got home, I received a message from one of my friends from my travels. We had already planned our next destination. This time, we were going somewhere even farther. We were going to Northern Europe to see the Aurora Borealis. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew that, in that moment, I was happy and free. I would never go back to the way things were. and I would never let anyone or anything bind me again. Nothing could make me lose myself anymore.